I'm Joshua P. Warren, and this is the Speaking of Strange report for May 21st, 2017. To start with a story I'm going to call Chapter 1, Goosebumps. You know, I am here at my place in Puerto Rico, and I'll be heading back to the States in the near future, but I've been doing a lot of research here all over the island. You're going to hear about some pretty wild stuff tonight. But I love when you just go into a restaurant or a bar and you just sort of strike up a conversation with someone there that you may or may not have met before, and suddenly they tell you a personal experience that really makes an impact. Just a few nights ago, I went into a new establishment, a nice new bar with really good food within walking distance of my place. So my wife Lauren and I walked into the restaurant and we were chatting with the owner of the place. And I think he said it's okay for me to use his name, but I'd rather not, just in case. So he was just fascinated by the unexplained, the paranormal, and he said, I have a very good reason for being interested in all this. And at one point, it was getting kind of loud inside, and he said, would you like to step outside so I can tell you about this experience I had? Fine. So we went outside, kind of in the smoking area, and he held out his left wrist, and there was a very obvious scar on his wrist. And now this fella is in his mid-40s. I think he said he was 46. And he said, this is from my suicide attempt 10 years ago. I said, oh, that's terrible. He said, I was married to the woman of my dreams, at least so I thought, and I was absolutely shocked when she decided she wanted a divorce. And I said, I did everything I could to talk her out of it, but nope, it went through. She divorced me. He said, I became so depressed. Late one night, I decided to end it all. So I sat down with a bottle of Smirnoff vodka and a container full of pills and a razor blade. He said, I downed the pills and chugged that bottle of vodka. I cut my left wrist as deeply as possible, laid back, and went to sleep. Everything as black as night could ever be. Next thing he's aware of, he wakes up and he's in a hospital bed, hooked up to all kinds of things you can imagine, very disoriented. He said it took him a good 2 to 3 days to get his head back on straight. The staff was very attentive, and when he finally was back in his right state of mind, he said, how did I get here? Because there'd been nobody else around when he did this. How did I get here? And the doctor said, well, that's actually a pretty interesting story. So late at night, this older lady with long white hair came dragging you through the front door into the lobby. And everybody rushed over to help. And the next thing we knew, this lady was gone. She had completely vanished. We have no idea who she was. And the man said to me, the one woman that I probably really loved more than any other woman in my life, the woman who actually raised me, was my grandmother. She died a long time ago, but everybody knew her because of her famous long white hair. Now, folks, that was the moment when, I don't know about you, but I got ice water down my back. In fact, it just happened again. The chill down the spine, the goosebumps, I'm rubbing my arms right now. Woo! Isn't that something, that sensation? I hope that you get that. Some people never get that. I do. This guy looked me right in the eye and told me this and showed me the evidence on his body. I hear a lot of stories, but once in a while I hear one that really, really hits me. And that one, boy, what a story. And it makes you realize, hey, when you encounter things like that, there is something going on here. There's something going on here that is beyond what you and I are aware of on a day-to-day basis, because we get so caught up in our own little problems and distractions. But no, there's something bigger out there, and there's a reason that all of us are here, and there's a reason that some of us are here even though we shouldn't be here. So think about that. I wanted to start out this podcast with that story, but I've got another one for you. And boy, this is an interesting story. Chapter 2. The Vampire of Moca. Have you ever heard of the Vampire of Moca? El Vampiro de Moca? Well, you probably haven't. But there's a good chance that you've heard of this thing called the Chupacabra. Now, let me take a moment to explain some things to you about the Chupacabra. A lot of people think of the Chupacabra, and they think of how that word has been misused to describe these mangy coyotes and similar animals that are occasionally found in the American Southwest, around Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, attacking livestock. That's not the real Chupacabra. The term Chupacabra was coined in 1995, and it originated right here on the island of Puerto Rico. Now, essentially what happened was there was this town called Canavanas, and there was this period of time there in 1995 where all kinds of animals, chickens, goats, pigs, but especially goats, were being found drained of blood. Nobody could explain what was going on. Well, right around that time, there was this woman named Madeline Tolentino who looked out her kitchen window one day and saw this shocking-looking creature moving in the vegetation around her house. She described it quite vividly and even had a sketch artist produce a sketch, which you can find with relative ease on the internet. Basically, we're talking about a being that's standing on two legs, that's about 4, maybe even 5 feet tall. It's slightly hunched. The skin has a reptilian sort of essence, big black eyes, and spines running down the middle of its head and all the way down its back. And the spines are iridescent, sort of changing color from red to blue to green to orange. And, just a freaky, hideous-looking thing. And she was so astounded that she actually contacted authorities. And her story made it into the media. And there was a well-known Puerto Rican comedian at that time who was making fun of her story and other experiences. And so he came up with this word, chupacabra, which in Spanish means goat sucker. So what's interesting is that this term that is now associated with a paranormal entity or phenomenon is actually it originated from the mind of a comedian who was poking fun at the whole thing. Now, over the years, people who claim they have come into contact with this being say that it seems almost like something interdimensional. That when you encounter it, sometimes it will build up this swirling energy around it, and it'll sort of shoot off into the sky. It has this teleporting alien type element. So we're definitely not talking about something like a mangy coyote or something along those lines. Now, obviously, people can interpret that term however they choose. And in fact, in my Asheville Mystery Museum, I do have a skull that was found in the crawl space of a house where some of these things have been happening that some people think is a chupacabra skull. So if you're ever at my museum, you can look at that skull and see what you think of it. But here is my point, okay? All that happened, the birth of the chupacabra in 1995. And that's all that many people think about if they even really get serious about trying to understand this. However, 20 years before this, in 1975, there was another incident that is lesser known, but was getting a lot of headlines at the time, in a town called Moca, on the opposite side of the island. Now, you have to remember the place Canavanas I was telling you about, that is near San Juan, the busy area with a really high population. You go to the opposite side of the island, the population drops significantly. So what happened in Moca in 1975 was almost seen as its own isolated incident. A lot of people did not connect the dots until later on that maybe there's a connection between what happened in Moca and what happened in Canavanas. So I decided I was going to travel to Moca and learn about this thing that occurred the first 6 months of 1975 that the press labeled the phenomenon of the vampire of Moca. You can still find plenty of news stories about this scanned in from the day, but they're very, very similar to what I was just describing. We're talking about hundreds of animals, cows, pigs, chickens, goats, being discovered, usually in the morning, and at some point in the middle of the night, they're completely drained of blood. I mean, not a drop of blood anywhere. How do you explain that, right? So I teamed up with a couple of my good friends down here, a couple of investigators in Puerto Rico. I'm sure that you've heard me talk about on this podcast, and speaking of strange regular shows, my great friend, investigator Captain Ida. She is a retired Navy officer who has a great sense of adventure. And my friend investigator Ellis, who is a certified Puerto Rico tour guide, which is actually a difficult thing to attain. They have a very stringent process for that here in Puerto Rico. And he also has a great background in science and technology. And so those two, they're fluent in both English and Spanish. And where my Espanol is still pretty choppy. But nonetheless, I teamed up with those two, and we decided to go to Moca and just go in cold and start asking questions. And you never know what kind of a reception that you're going to get when you do that sort of thing, because some of these towns are full of people that are very superstitious, and and they don't know what your agenda is, and they might think maybe you're coming in to make fun of something. You just never know. So we went to Moca, and the first thing we did was go to the police department and ask the policemen if they had any records, and they said, oh, that's been destroyed. That's 42 years ago. Isn't that amazing to think that 1975 was 42 years ago? Those records were destroyed long ago. So we started going around town and talking to people, and we found that, I had a list of all these names of people who were in these newspaper articles. And every time I would meet an older person, I would ask that person, do you know anything about this individual or that individual? And they're like, oh, this guy's dead, this lady's dead, yeah, this guy's dead. I mean, I'm just crossing names off the list left and right because so many of these people had died. It was looking like it was going to be pretty hard to find somebody who was actually in a news story. I did, however, have a lot of success because we found people who, are older folks who were alive during that time who could confirm, that these stories were true as far as they knew, and that they knew the individuals, but they didn't have a direct connection to the story. And mind you, I went in this with a very open mind. I didn't know what to expect. I went in and I was thinking, well, maybe this is some kind of a normal biological creature that has this weird property, this ability to suck all this blood out of animals. Or maybe this is some kind of an interdimensional being. Maybe it's a hoax. Could this be a hoax? I mean, there were people who were saying that there was a satanic cult in the area that was going around and sneaking around and draining animals of blood. I didn't know. But I will tell you this. Just let me pause for a moment and say, on a side note, I grew up on a small farm in Asheville, North Carolina. And we had goats and chickens and horses and ducks and rabbits and all that. And it was part of my my chores to water and feed the animals. And one day, my dad and I realized that we were finding all these dead chickens, and we couldn't explain what was killing them because we didn't see any evidence that anything was digging around and getting into their coop. But the weird thing is they were not eaten. They were drained of blood. And I'm going to say we probably found at least a dozen chickens like that. And so my dad finally decided to set a trap one night. And my dad, he used to be a muskrat trapper way back in the day. And so he took a muskrat trap and he put some bloody chicken meat on it and let it sit out there all night. And that night we heard the dogs barking, and we all went outside and we heard the chains of the trap rattling. It was very exciting and spooky. And so we went up there with flashlights, and we were absolutely amazed to find that here we have this trap, and there is the largest great horned owl I've ever seen, with its big old finger and claw hung in that muskrat trap. And boy, that owl was puffed up and pissed off. And I mean, that owl had to be over 3 feet tall. It was a beautiful and freakish thing to see. So my dad took a big long pole and used it to push the release on the trap. And then we got out of there because we did not want to be near that thing in attack mode. And you know what? After that, we never, ever lost another chicken with its blood drained. Now, I have never heard of a great horned owl being a vampire and sucking blood like that. I have gotten on the internet and I've looked into that and I've researched it, and I still have never seen evidence of that. So I can't say for 100% certain that great horned owl was doing that. But what I can tell you is that if that was not the culprit, it sure seemed pretty suspicious that happened, and then it all stopped. So I went into this possibly thinking, well, maybe, getting back to Moca, maybe, is it possible that some of this could be a big owl or something like that? But you have to understand, there's a huge difference between sucking the blood from a chicken and a cow. I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen a cow slaughtered before, but there's a lot of blood. There's a lot of blood. And, to find cows and chickens and goats drained of blood, not a drop on the ground, happening in the short span of time during nightfall. I mean, if you really let that sink in, that's incredible. So anyway, the first day we collected a lot of good data, and fortunately, some of the info that we left around town ended up in us getting a phone call, and we got to go back for a second trip, and that is where I met the most amazing guy. The big newspaper back in those days, which is still around, is called Vocero. And there was an article on the front page of Vocero. I believe it was July 31st of 1975. Front page with a picture there of two farmers and a whole piece about the animals they had lost to the vampire of Moca. So we're talking about this had already been going on for at least 6 months. A lot of the people I talked to said actually these incidents started before 1975, maybe 74, or even as early as 73, but it wasn't until 75 when the media really started running with it. So one of those farmers who was on the front page was a man named Samuel Munez. And he had lost, dozens of animals. He said he would find up to 16 at a time in the morning. And so, I'll get back to that article in a minute, but it turns out he was fairly young at the time, because now he's only 70 years old. And I was able to sit down with him at a restaurant and pick his brain for over 2 hours. And you know what's especially cool is he is now a policeman. He has been a policeman for the past 8 years. So, how amazing is that I got to sit down with a man who is a policeman right now, meaning he's in a very trusted position at this point in his life, who also was on the front page of the newspaper in 1975 as one of the guys who lost animals. So I started, talking to him about this in great detail, and I was saying, okay, what exactly did the animals look like? He said, well, it was always the same thing. And you can see this in the pictures from the time. They had nice little puncture wounds, always on the neck. Didn't matter if it was a chicken or a goat or a cow, it always was on the neck. Nice little, perfect little puncture marks, little circles, and not a drop of blood. And they never found any type of footprint that gave them any kind of a clue. But here's what he told me that really made a huge impression. And after I talked to him, I really noticed this, because 2 or 3 people had told me this before. But after I talked to him, this kept coming up over and over and over again. Okay, if you look at those newspaper articles, all of them talk about, oh, the animals are being drained of blood, and some creature has done this, and who knows what it is. But when I would talk to people who knew about these incidents in person, whether they were directly involved like him or indirectly involved, every single one of them would say, oh, and by the way, the night before this happened, we would see these weird red and yellow lights in the sky. And they would land on a hill and sit there for about 10 minutes in the distance and then fly off. And I'm like, oh, huh? Excuse me? That was never mentioned in any of the articles of the day. And yet every single person is bringing this up to me. And he says, oh yeah, absolutely. Like, duh. Oh, I thought everybody knew that. He says, oh yeah, I saw him. He says, the red and yellow lights, they'd come down, they'd sit on the hill there, and then they'd fly off. I said, well, where did they fly toward? He said, toward Utuado. Now, Utuado is a mountain town that is famous because it is an indigenous ceremonial area where the ancient Taino Indians used to have some of their most significant sites. Keep that in the back of your mind for some future work that I'm going to be presenting to you, because I'm working on a documentary right now about some of the stuff that's happening here that may be tied to what was happening in the Taino culture thousands of years ago. So anyway, that said, oh yeah, everybody's, there are these, they're red and yellow, they're always red and yellow, they're flying around the whole time. And I thought, well, this is incredible that this did not make it into the reports of the day. And it may be because it was just too sensational, or who knows what. So as a guy who came into this thinking, all right, I'm going to have an open mind. I don't know if this is some biological creature that hasn't been discovered or an interdimensional, or now I'm thinking this sounds like some type of an extraterrestrial phenomenon, doesn't it? It sounds like something from space that was coming down and doing this. And by the way, this was 1975, okay? 20 years later, we have 1995, when the official Chupacabra stuff began. And then about 20 years later, not quite 20 years, but around 2010, heading toward 2015, there was this other phenomenon in a nearby town called Guanica, where people are seeing this thing flying around they call the gargula, that looks like a 6-foot-tall gargoyle. I've talked about that before on the Speaking of Strange radio show. Is there a 20-year cycle here? Is there a 20-year cycle? Because think about it. If scientists are doing an experiment, they record things on a regular cyclical basis. Okay, so they're like, well, here's what we found after week 1. Here's what we found after month 1. Here's what we found after year 1. So maybe if there is some experiment that's being done here, especially by these beings from elsewhere that are viewing this planet as a lab, maybe it's on a 20-year cycle. And if that's correct, then I'm going to predict that, somewhere in the neighborhood of, we'll say, if the last one, I'm going to say the last one may have hit around, I think that it started around 2010. So, I'm going to say probably in about another 10 years, getting close to 2030, things will pick up again here. That's my prediction, made here on May 21st of 2017. But anyway, look. If this place is the subject of an experiment, and there's plenty of reason to believe that there may be a lot of experimentation going on here. Could it be because, well, this is a U.S. territory, but it's not a U.S. state, and therefore, there are people who say some deal was struck between Eisenhower and the aliens, after the Roswell crash, saying you give us technology and you get to do experiments. But the deal was, don't experiment with people in the States. You go to this island that we control and do your stuff out there. I don't know. But remember how I told you that in that article, that front page photo, it had Samuel Munez on the left, and on the right is this other fella, and between them, in the picture, is standing a German Shepherd. I said, why is there a German Shepherd in the picture? And he said, because that dog is a hero. Was a hero. Apparently, one of the things in the article was that on one of these nights, when this creature was attacking the animals, that German Shepherd ran into the shadows and fought with the vampire of Moca and scared it away. And the German Shepherd was wounded, but not, a life-threatening wound. He recovered, and after that, he was considered a hero the rest of his life, the bravest dog around, because he scared off the vampire of Moca. Because the vampire never came back to that property after that dog attacked it. And I said to Mr. Munez, I said, I'll tell you a couple of things. I have a museum, in Asheville, North Carolina, called the Asheville Mystery Museum. Number one, I would love to have anything physical related to that heroic dog. His collar, his water bowl, or anything physical related to any animal killed by the vampire of Moca. It could be a bone retrieved or something like that. I'd love to have anything physical if it's out there. And he said, okay, I'll look and see. So I'll keep you updated on that. The second thing was, I said, I'd love to sit down and interview you on camera. I did not bring a camera the first time because I knew how valuable he was, and I did not want to come in with a camera and possibly scare him off. Because anytime you walk into a situation and you've got a camera there, people can get a little bit nervous until they get to know you. So he said, that's fine, that's great, that's no problem. So I'm going to go back and interview him on camera, and this is a very historic thing I'm going to document. But he also said that the other guy in the picture is still alive, and he's going to talk to him and see if I can interview him as well. So how cool will that be if I can hold up this article from 1975 with these two guys on it and say, here we are 42 years later, and have them sitting there with me asking them questions about this. That would be awesome. So hopefully that's going to happen soon, and I'll give you an update on that, and you'll be able to watch it. I'll put it on the internet. In the meantime, there's this great photograph of me standing next to Samuel Munez holding the article there, and I look like a giant next to him. And that I'll have posted. I think I'll probably just go ahead and post it alongside the podcast page. By the way, if you don't know how to listen to these podcasts on a regular basis, just go to speakingofstrange.com. and click the podcast page. You'll find podcasts of this, which is the Speaking of Strange report. This is a supplement that I do from time to time to the main show. And then the main show, which is hosted by Vance Pollock, that airs pretty much on a weekly basis. So you'll find both of them there, and you can subscribe through iTunes and various other services, Buzzsprout, so on. But I think I'll have a picture there, and I'll also, if you follow my Twitter feed or Facebook page, I'll post it there as well. So I'm really excited about being able to go back there and follow up on that. And I was talking to my great friend Christian just a couple days ago, and he is the director of the new Asheville Cryptid Society. And so, and he's been out in the woods doing some amazing research as well. At some point, I'll have to just get Christian on this podcast, perhaps, and we can just talk about what he's been up to. But of course, he was fascinated by what I've been sort of discovering or rediscovering down here about the vampire of Moca. And so I want to remind you, if you, no matter where you are in the world, I mean, if you're in the Asheville area, Western North Carolina area, fine. Wonderful. But even if you're not, if you have any kind of a cryptid report, contact Christian at AshevilleCryptidSociety.com. Cryptid is spelled Cryptid. Cryptids are mysterious creatures, okay? They're creatures that may or may not exist according to mainstream science. So go to AshevilleCryptidSociety.com. Email Christian. I am a member of the AshevilleCryptidSociety.com, and this is Christian's specialty. So if you have a weird creature story, please go there, let us know. So I'll continue to keep you updated on my progress as I investigate El Vampiro de Moca, the vampire of Moca in Puerto Rico. And now, after I take a sip of water, Chapter 3, Ghosts, Pirates, and UFOs. Speaking of Puerto Rico, my Haunted Asheville ghost tours, fortunately, have been a great success. I wrote the book Haunted Asheville 22 years ago, something like that. It was the first book of Asheville ghost stories ever published. And our Haunted Asheville ghost tours were born from that, as well as the Asheville Mystery Museum. And the Mystery Museum is there in the basement of the Asheville Masonic Temple, which is a fantastic place. If you ever want to have an event in Asheville and you're looking for a good venue, contact me through joshuapwarren.com, and I will do everything possible to hook you up with a great deal. But I have been looking for a long time to create some type of a tour in Puerto Rico. Now, I did create an online, it's an app. It's a self-guided tour of Old San Juan. And if you go to sanjuanghosttours.com, you'll find the app there. In fact, I'm going to type that in right now just to make sure that it's tours and not tour. Because San Juan Ghost Tours, sanjuanghosttours.com. You'll find the app there. Available for iTunes, Android, Amazon, all that stuff. And you can, even if you may never even go to Puerto Rico, you can go there and you can listen to these stories. You'll hear me reading them with music and sound effects in the background. So I love creating tours, but I'm not a certified tour operator here in Puerto Rico. To be a certified tour operator here, it's stringently controlled by the government of Puerto Rico. You've got to be very fluent in both English and Spanish. you have to take all these courses and classes and pass all these tests, and it's a really big to do. It's a big deal. But my friend Ellis is a certified tour operator, so I said, hey, let's team up, and we have created this tour that is going to be debuting here in Puerto Rico. And I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I know that many of you listening to this will probably never come to Puerto Rico, even though you should. It's a paradise. It's called Ghosts, Pirates, and UFOs of Puerto Rico, and it's going to officially debut mid-June. The website is paranormalpuertorico.com. Some interesting questions. Why is Puerto Rico the middle of the Bermuda Triangle? What are the most haunted places on the island? How can you see a UFO or USO? What does the blood-sucking chupacabra really look like? Where are pirate spirits? Have you heard of the vampire of Moca? Did you know about the gargula? Do you know about mutant monkeys that roam the island from an experiment gone wrong? Okay, we address all that stuff, and it's so cool. We have a presentation where you get to watch video and see pictures, and it's really, really neat. So anyway, if you are interested, if you're going to be in Puerto Rico and you're going to be on the West Coast, this only takes place in Rincon. So that's about a 3.5 or 4 hour drive from San Juan. But if you're going to be in Puerto Rico and you're going to be on the West Coast, go to paranormalpuertorico.com and check out this brand new tour that Ellis and I have put together called Ghosts, Pirates, and UFOs of Puerto Rico. Speaking of new businesses, as I mentioned, I will be heading back to the States at some point in the near future. Please don't ask me when that will be. That is one of those things that I find a little annoying. Frankly, I don't want to come across like, but I have one of those schedules where I could be planning to go somewhere in 3 days and just change my plans at the last minute because something arises. There's some opportunity that comes up. There's some phenomenon that comes up. There's some experiment that needs to be wrapped up. I'm very fortunate that I have a flexible life. So I really, I don't like it when people ask me when I'm going to be at this place or that place. When are you going to be back? Because I feel like I can't give an honest answer. It's like I'll let you know when I'm back, but I don't want to tell you when I'm going to be back because that may or may not work out that way. So that said, I'm really looking forward to getting back to Asheville, though, because there's some really cool stuff going on there. I want to mention this just as a shout out. If you happen to be in the Asheville, North Carolina area, a couple of my great friends there, and I guess I'll just throw their name. It's been in the media. Kevin Fraser and Steve Green. They are a couple of the owners of this new business in Asheville, North Carolina called Well Played Board Game Cafe. Yeah. You ever heard of that? A board game cafe. This is an establishment in downtown Asheville that has, it's brand new, okay? And they have over 500 board games and space to play all these board games, people there to help you understand the rules of the board games, and, hey, it's Asheville. You got to have beer. They've got craft beer there in addition to more mainstream beer, but they've got local craft Asheville beer and all that, wine. They've got coffee. After all, it is a cafe, so they have all the stuff that a coffee and a bar have. They have food, including some stuff that it brings you back. It's nostalgic stuff that takes you back, the comfort foods from your childhood. Like, for example, you can get a pizza Hot Pocket, or you can get a grilled cheese sandwich, But they also have things that are more elaborate. I mean, I'm going to be hanging out there all the time when I get back. So I'm looking forward to that. Check out their website if you're in the Asheville area. The website is wellplayedasheville.com. WELLPLAYED Asheville.com. Wellplayedasheville.com. They have the largest board game selection of any establishment that has ever been opened in the state of North Carolina. And maybe I'm getting old, but I'm a board game geek. Okay, so I hope that you will check that out. Asheville's cool. There's so much interesting stuff to do in Asheville, North Carolina. And the Haunted Asheville Ghost Tour is one of them. What a day that would be. Do the Haunted Asheville Ghost Tour. Go to Well Played. See the Asheville Mystery Museum. All right, so I want to leave you with one final thing. As you know, I have been working on these sigils, and I won't go back and explain what they are again. You'll just have to listen to one of my previous podcasts. These are symbols that I'm creating using a special process that I have partially invented in the laboratory. And I have created a brand new batch of sigils that is very elaborate. Before I had 4 of these things. Now there are many more. These are freely available. I want you to go and use them and give me feedback. And so far I've gotten thousands of emails from people saying, this worked for me. And I've gotten one email from one lady who said, this did not work for me. So that's pretty impressive. So go to joshuapwarren.com, scroll down to see the sigils, the symbols there, and it'll say for the complete batch, click here. And when you do that, it'll take you to all the new ones. And I'm going to continue adding new ones to that. So if you want to stay updated, please sign up for my free e-newsletter, which you can do there through joshuapwarren.com. You're also going to find a link there to the Wishing Machine Project. And there are lots and lots, thousands of wishing machine owners all over the United States, all over the world. What am I talking about? All over the world. And you can take these sigils and you can put them into a wishing machine. So that actually saves you a little work. If you're like, okay, this sigil represents what I want, put that into the input, tune it, you're done. So I'm delighted to announce that all these years that my partner Dr. Mulder and I have been making these wishing machines available, we've been getting feedback from people about features that they would like. And so this has culminated in a brand new wishing machine. A new design called the Wishing Machine Model Field X. And that stands for Field Explorer. This is the most compact, portable wishing machine we've ever offered. It's so small, it's about the size of the palm of my hand. And you can get a battery pack to go with it into the field and keep that thing charged anywhere from 24 to 96 hours if you want to use an electrical device, because some of these wishing machines are non-electrical, but this one is. You plug that battery pack in, and if you want to go in the field and do experiments and projects like I do, this is invaluable. So if you go there to joshuapwarren.com and you're looking at the sigil stuff, be sure to click the link to the wishing machine page and look up the new model Field X. And if you don't know what a wishing machine is, I don't know where you've been. Maybe you've been living in a cave. go to wishingmachineproject.com, wishingmachineproject.com, and read about these things. Watch the videos. There's an FAQ there you can click. There's hours and hours and hours of free information out there about wishing machines at wishingmachineproject.com. My friends, I have so much new stuff coming up to share with you soon. I almost want to just start talking about some of it now, but I can't, because I still need to get some things wrapped up. I need to get some theories confirmed, some thoughts solidified. But as you know, this podcast, the Speaking of Strange report, the supplement to the regular Speaking of Strange show, it is free. It will always be free. You don't have to sign up for anything. You don't have to subscribe to anything. All you have to do is go to speakingofstrange.com, and you can click the link to podcasts, and you will find them there. You can just click it and listen. Or if you're on my website, joshuapwarren.com, up on the homepage on the right-hand corner, there's a little button that says Special Podcasts. And if you click that, it will give you nothing but the Speaking of Strange report. So this is just me, wherever I happen to be in the world, sitting down in front of my computer, talking nonstop for up to an hour and telling you what I've been up to. So, thank you so much for taking the time to listen. It means a lot to me. And I hope you enjoy getting reports in this format. You know, if I put commercials and music and stuff, I could drag this out 3 hours, but that's not how I choose to do this. I choose to give you the info, boom, 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 boom. Promote what I want to promote, and then I get to move on and do experiments and other fun stuff in the field. So thank you again for your interest, for your support. Go to joshuapwarren.com, check out those sigils, email me, let me know how they're working for you. I'll have some great new material for you in the near future. Always be sure to sign up for my free e-newsletter to get updates when this new stuff is posted. And in the meantime, may the Force be with you.